to lean in and push on the clay. Let the clay start to work up before you bring your hands up, right? Make sure that clay starts to work its way up. And then once the clay starts to work its way up, then you follow behind, continuing to squeeze in. Alright? Remember, I'm not lifting the clay. Alright? If you start thinking that you have to lift the clay, you're going to wind up with half the clay in your hands and half the clay on the wheel head. Alright? So you're just squeezing in. And this is getting rid of and eliminating all that strong twist mark. So I know I'm going to come back up again, so I don't want to go too flat with the clay. So I'm leaving it somewhat rounded on top. If you go too flat, then when you start to bring the clay up again, you're much more likely to get that divot in the top. Right? The two reasons you get that divot are going too flat when you take the clay down, and then coming up too quickly. Right? Not letting the clay work ahead of your hand. So again, squeeze in, let the clay start to work up. And then follow it all the way up to the top.
Doug, are the heels of your hands touching when you squeeze
the heels
up?
Of my hands?
Yeah.
No, not really.
No?
I mean,
Okay.
not down here.
Yeah.
They could be.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
I think that's how I do.
I'm kind of pushing in from here with both hands together. Yeah. All right. And to confuse you thoroughly, on the next one, I'm going to show you one other technique that sometimes is helpful for students. I've started doing this because I found that some students find it beneficial. But it's a method that I primarily use when I'm working with larger pieces of clay. But for some students, it seems to be helpful. And that's to, instead of having both hands here, which would be at like 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock, pushing in, what you do is you go, your left hand stays where it is because the clay's coming into your hand, you're using your body to push in, right? The clay's going up. And then taking the other hand up here at about 1 o'clock and pulling this hand back towards you. But again, you're squeezing the clay as opposed to thinking of it as lifting the clay. Right? So that feels good. You can reuse all this slip, keep the clay wet so your hands don't stick at any point. This last time I go down, I'm going to make it a little bit lower and get it ready to start opening. Okay? So again, my pressure is coming at a slight angle, pushing down with my right into my left hand. And then when I get to about here, I'm just going to let my right palm, right here, just going to continue down to the work head, and then hold the clay.
Are you pushing with the left hand too?
I'm pushing, no, my left hand is not pushing down, it's pushing in. Pushing in.
Yeah, like this.
Yes, right. I thought you meant like pushing down with it. No. I mean, there is a technique of doing it that way, and that's not the way I do it. Okay, so I've got the clay centered. If the clay weren't centered at this point, you don't need to keep going up and down. It's just a matter of holding the clay centered. Locking your left arm in, holding steady with your right. Start to find the center with your left thumb, and then the two fingers on your right hand are going to press down in towards the middle, keeping as much of your left hand on the clay as you can. This is going to help you feel for it on the outside. Right. If you feel it starting to go off center, you can slow down and re-hold the clay, re-center it. If at any point you feel like you had it centered, right? You feel like you had the clay centered, and then you feel like all of a sudden it's off center. Stop at that point and re-center the clay. Right? Don't try to keep going with it off center. Try to re-center it. How would you re-center it? I would probably continue to hold my left hand here and kind of hold this edge, and then I would either use my fingers like I would on the top rim and kind of hold here, or I may even take my hand this way and kind of hold it like this. Okay, just to kind of re-center and re-hold the clay, and then always make sure you're coming off nice and slowly, sneaking away from the clay. All right, bottom. Maybe a little bit thicker than the thickness of my needle tool. And now I'm going to open up for the floor. This is going to be done with my left hand coming up, my fingers on the inside, my thumb on the outside, my right hand on top, and I'm going to pull across, trying to pull nice and parallel with the workhead across. When I get about 2/3 of the way across, I'm going to curl my fingers under, and that's what's going to create the corner for me. Okay? So as I come across, now I curl my fingers under, and that's going to create the corner. All right? So I'm establishing the diameter of the inside of my cylinder at this point, and hopefully I should be able to keep it at that diameter throughout the process. Obviously, I can't go any wider than what I've centered my clay. So you need to make sure that the clay is centered wide enough. And now I'm just cleaning up the base before I start to do anything else. It's much easier to get my hand into the inside now than it will be once I've started to raise the wall. All right. Oftentimes there'll be a little bit of this overhang. The last thing I want to do before I start raising the walls is just pull back a little bit at 12 o'clock. I'm just using my fingers, kind of using the flats on my fingers here, just kind of holding the clay and pulling the clay back. It's just better to get the clay started, you know, working vertically. Since the tendency is for the clay to want to go out anyway, it's better to start with it, you know, in, and to keep that slightly, you know, cone shape as you go. Okay, so now I'm moving over to my right hand side, right hand outside, left hand inside, right? I'm going to keep my left thumb on my right hand. My fingers on the inside are going to go down like this. Basically, this point here on my middle finger is going to kind of just go down in the corner, just like this. And my outside hand, I like to create like a point of contact that I'm using. And so I tend to tuck these two fingers out of the way, and I use kind of the flat here of my middle finger on the outside. And my other finger might rest on, but that's really where I'm pressing. Okay, and I tend to put these two fingers together as if I'm getting ready to snap. It creates a rigid surface, as opposed to just using my fingers. All right. Okay, so make sure that you have enough water on the clay. So I'll start by pressing in at the base, let that clay start to come up, and then yeah. Again, you can work with the sponge, without the sponge, whatever you're comfortable with. There's not a wrong or a right in that regard. So I'll use the sponge this time. The sponge will be on touching the clay. So again, I'm pressing in at the base, letting that clay start to come up. And you just want to try to make sure that you're coming nice and evenly all the way to the top. As long as your throw rings are evenly spaced, then you know you're kind of coming at a nice consistent rate. Right? If you find that they're really close together, and then far away, and then close together, that means you're slowing down, speeding up, slowing down, speeding up.
Can I ask a question at this point?
Shoot.
Okay, so if you're either using a sponge or your finger on the outside, on the inside, are you using two fingers or?
I'm primarily using my middle finger here, and I'm trying not to use, again, I'm not using the tip of it, but I'm trying to use like the flat edge. I'm trying to keep a broader surface on the clay.
And are they kind of opposite each other, or is one hand lower or higher than the other?
Right now, they're basically directly opposite one another.
Wow.
There is a point at which I will have one higher or lower, or one hand higher and one hand lower. But right now, I think it's much easier in the beginning to just think about having them opposite.